It supports the comprehensive strategy that we've been pursuing with our allies and our partners.
That was President Obama Wednesday calling on Congress to authorize the use of military force against the Islamic State and support what he says is the administration's comprehensive strategy for defeating the terror group. So, Dorothy, a couple of things, limitations he's asking Congress to impose. One, no authorization for enduring ground combat operations, quote unquote, and then also a 3-year time limit. You've followed these things for a long time and looked at presidents and war.
Yes.
Can you recall a president asking Congress to put limits on his ability to fight that war?
This is, like many other aspects, only a more important one, unique in our history. Most of our history has consisted of calling for maximum strength, voiced, however, best by Winston Churchill, who said, "You ask what is our policy. Our policy is to wage war, to wage relentless war against a monstrous tyranny unequaled in history. You ask what is our aim. Our aim is victory."
And he didn't go to Parliament and say, "You know what, please. let's put a time limit on this.
But
this is the way this president operates. Remember, in late 2009, he went to West Point. He gave a speech announcing a surge in Afghanistan, a war he said we must win, except that the surge was going to have fewer troops than the generals were asking for, and there was going to be a sunset clause. There was going to be a time provision. So that is precisely the way he has acted. And what we are doing is we are telling our enemies, wait us out, and eventually we will go.
The 3-year time limit is also, if I were one of the presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton or Republican, the last thing I would want would be a war resolution that runs out in my first year, and basically you have to go back to Congress to reauthorize it and maybe try to renegotiate the terms that have already been set implicitly on the war. That really makes it tougher for them.
Yeah, it ties the president's hands, and they have to go back and re-argue this situation again. And you know, when you have a resolution that has words like enduring in it, which is very hard to define, or limited, it allows the lawyers to come in. That's a very big point. An idea like this sends confusion, I think, to the Pentagon. What limits are being imposed on them? The president cites this comprehensive coalition he's got over there. On the ground, that coalition is the Iraqi army and the Kurdish Peshmerga.
And during offensive ground combat operations, that means they can have ground operations that are defensive, but how do you define offensive? Does it mean you can't take ground? What does it mean?
Well, look, also, I mean, Dan is absolutely right, but the other issue here is if we were conducting right now a shock and awe campaign against ISIS, then there would be more justification for saying, look, we're going to do this we're going to do this for 2 years, and then Congress may reauthorize. But the fact is that we are conducting perhaps the least offensive air campaign in American history. We are conducting a fraction of the sorties we did over Kosovo. So you're talking about a president whose military strategy is not exactly this hard-hitting attempt to quickly defeat ISIS, scatter them to the four corners. 2 years would hardly be enough to retake 2 more towns in Syria.
But the administration would argue.
It's Rand Paul's military strategy.
Okay, but that's what the president would say he is attempting here. He's going to run up the middle. All right, you got Republicans who want him to have an unrestricted war authorization. Then you have Democrats who want even more restrictions. Don't fight outside of Iraq and maybe or Syria. You want to have an even tougher limitation on ground troops. So he's saying, look, I'm dealing with a political reality as it is.
Well, here's the thing. They had an old saying in the 60s we should look back on, which is the whole world is watching. The whole world is watching this essentially ludicrous and obviously ludicrous attempt to wage a non-war and sound as though we were leaders of the world.
But wait a minute. The administration says they're making progress against ISIS, that Kobani has been liberated in Syria from Islamic State, and they've had a lot of fighters killed.
Well, they have reached a bit of a standoff with ISIS, though ISIS is far from defeated and it's not going away. I mean, there were just reports that 20,000 foreign fighters are coming to reinforce the ISIS army that is already there. We described earlier that Yemen has essentially collapsed in the past week. in Libya, the Libyans do not control their own capital.
Right.
So the idea that we have brought them to a standstill is really quite an overstated claim by the part of the administration.
So if you were a Republican leader on Capitol Hill, would you endorse the president's authorization as written?
No, I would not. What I would authorize is greater spending for the Defense Department and tell them that we want to give them the resources to be able to fight ISIS rather than simply sign on.
And the president, look, the president has the authorities he needs already under the 2001 and 2002 terror and Iraq resolutions. So he has that. He has what he needs. Legally.
A clean resolution without restrictions be fine by me. Otherwise, don't make the war harder to win. When we come back, critics are calling him Scott Walker on steroids. And only a month into the job, Governor Bruce Rauner is wasting no time taking on public sector unions in Illinois. So does his economic turnaround plan stand a chance in that deep blue state?